Thank you everyone for being here. As you know, this is our May Real Property Financial Services section brown bag, and we have an absolutely fantastic panel today, as is evident by the number of people who came in to hear what these folks have to say. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction of each one of the three speakers. Oh, by the way, I'm Jennifer Lim, I'm the chair of the section. Then I'm going to turn it over to them, and I hope that they'll spend a few minutes talking more about what they do. My introduction is going to be sort of the generic, this is where they work, this is what they've done, but they can actually tell you more about the kind of work they do. Then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion with some questions and toss them back and forth to the panelists. And then we'll open it up to everybody in this room, including the people on the phone, to ask questions, okay? Because they've all got, or each one of these three people have extremely different backgrounds. But one thing they all have in common is that they're all licensed attorneys. So without further ado, I'm going to start, because I always believe in ladies first, by introducing Erica Strawn. Erica Strawn is the Senior Assistant General Counsel at the Howard Hughes Corporation. As I'm sure everybody knows, Howard Hughes is doing tremendous work down in Kaka'ako with the Ward Village master plan. Erica has been here in Hawaii in that position for what, about 2 years?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Before coming to Hawaii to work with Howard Hughes, Erica actually did do some work in Hawaii because she was in-house counsel, general counsel with the Home Depot, which is a little company some of you probably heard of. You were based out of California, correct? But you were also doing work in Alaska, California, and Hawaii.
That's correct.
And she's got more background as well. She was in private practice. She can talk about that a little bit. And she's a graduate of UC Berkeley Bolt Hall School of Law. So thanks very much, Erica.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, and now Cameron Nakota, who a lot of you folks may have seen on TV, kind of a lot lately. Has something to do with a little project called Ho'opili, which hasn't really flown under the radar. Cameron's had tremendous success with Ho'opili. He is the vice president of D.R. Horton, correct, Cameron?
Yes.
And you were hired primarily, or your main focus has been the Ho'opili project. So you've been there since what, 2000?
About 5 years now.
Okay, about 2010.
Yeah.
And you're not really so much practicing law in your position there, but you did in fact practice law before coming to D.R. Horton. However, right before that, he was with Ainanui Corporation, also working on land use, entitlements, government relations, and then prior to that was a prosecuting attorney.
I was at Imanaka Kudo before that, and then prosecutor before that, yeah.
And all of this is within a span
jobs.
of 15, not even 15 years, right?
No.
Cameron hasn't been an attorney for terribly long, but yet he's got a fantastic and extremely successful career. So it'll be great to hear from Cameron. And then last and absolutely not least, thank you. Is Ed Case, and there can't be one person in this room or in the state of Hawaii really who doesn't know Ed Case. We're incredibly fortunate to have Ed with us today. Ed is currently, as many of you probably know, Senior Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of Outrigger Enterprises. He's been there about 2 years. Before that, Ed has a long and impressive career both in private practice and also in government. And we're talking real government, right? I mean, not just working at a state agency.
Doesn't seem so real right now.
back in the old days, immediately before going to Outrigger, Ed was a partner for about 6 years at Bays, Long, Rose, and Holma. Prior to that, he was a U.S. Congressman for the 2nd District, which is Hawaii, for about 5 years. He was a State House Representative for 8. And prior to that was at Carl Smith Law, which is my firm, for about 9 years.
20 years at Carl Smith.
Oh, God, you're right. Sorry. Going back even further, Ed actually has this distinction of having clerked for Chief Justice William Richardson, which is pretty cool. And you're also a legislative assistant for Senator Spork Matsunaga, so an incredibly varied and really impressive career. So without any further ado, welcome Ed, and then I'm going to go ahead and...
Want me to go?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. This is scripted, as you can see. Thank you so much for having all three of us here. I'm honored to be on the panel with my colleagues here, and I'm honored to be with all of you. I look around the room and see many people that have been part of my legal and other life, people that I've been partners with, people that I've practiced with, people that I've interacted with. people that I'm using right now for external attorneys, so I've got kind of a mix here. I've had a good career. It's been an interesting career. It has been 29 years private practice of law downtown Honolulu. The reason Jennifer's numbers didn't add up was because my service in the state legislature here was as a part-time legislator. I also was with Carl Smith during that period. And I'm not sure I would have necessarily seen my career unfolding the way it did, but it's been an exciting career and a very varied career. And the last 2 years with Outrigger as their legal officer and vice president have been just more of the same. It's been different, the same, rewarding. We can certainly get into the observations I have about that. But you know, I'm looking here at Jennifer. She said here that the way she's going to start this is by saying, Ed, as the person on the panel with the longest career history, what do you think about that? And my comment on that is, if you practice a long time, pretty soon you're going to get introduced like that. So be careful what you wish for. I think I'll stop there and move on, and then we can just get to your questions.
Oh, I'm next. So as Jennifer said, you know, I've been with DR now. It's about 5 years. Prior to that, I was with Ainanui, which you probably don't know, but it was an affiliate of the Campbell Estate. I was there for about 2 or 3 years, and before that, I was at Imanaka, Kudo, Fujimoto, and then across here. So I've been practicing about 12 years, and I've had probably the most jobs of everybody on the panel. So it speaks to the level of commitment or something.
Sorry, folks, the line seems bad.
That's okay.
Disconnected.
So I think, you know, like, as Jennifer said, I've transitioned a little bit now from the day-to-day practice of law to more of the business side of it, although I think
Joining conference now. This conference is being recorded by the organizer.
I think that, so I've transitioned a little bit. That doesn't mean that I don't deal with legal issues, or I kind of deal with it, deal with things that I used to deal with in my prior life day to day. It just means that I don't have to do the work anymore. That we can, that you can ask people to do the work, and you just miraculously get something in front of you on a piece of paper. So I actually like that part of this part of the business a little bit better, in that I don't have to look at the clock, and I don't have to look at, you know, that part of it. But I still get to do a lot of exciting things and deal with a lot of exciting people. In addition to, so we have our whole Pili community, which, as Jennifer says, is a small little project out in Kapolei that we've been working on for now. The company has owned it for 9 years. That's a separate business for Horton in Hawaii, and so I basically run all aspects of that. And then in addition, I also handle all of our real estate acquisitions. So whenever we're buying property here on Oahu or on the neighbor islands, I help to oversee that as well. So, you know, a pretty exciting day-to-day life outside of the practice of law, but, you know, a little exciting. So happy to answer any questions later and continue to talk about what it is we do.
Thanks, Cameron. Aloha, my name's Erica. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for inviting me to be on this panel. I feel pretty privileged to be on this panel with such esteemed colleagues and this very full room. So, Jennifer gave us a few thoughts about what she would like for us to share, and so I'll just jump in with a couple of thoughts, and then obviously I'm sure we'll have some questions and all of that. But what's maybe a little bit unique for me was coming to a company that had been in existence, and I was sort of the new player. So I've been with Howard Hughes for 1 year, 2 months. But as many of you know, there's been a long history there in Ward with an operating shopping center with Victoria Ward Limited and the development of those retail operations for years and years and years. And then at the time I joined, we were already several years into a redevelopment effort there. So an interesting place to join as the first attorney to set foot in the office, because their outside counsel had a very unique role, and the in-house attorneys were all out of state. So I was very fortunate in that I was able to inherit a wealth of knowledge and experience, expertise, and institutional history from some of the outside attorneys that I inherited in joining Howard Hughes Corporation. And so I thought I would just share a couple of thoughts about that, as there may be more attorneys in private practice here in the room, I'm not so sure. But certainly, amongst that pool of attorneys who I was fortunate enough to inherit, there are a few attorneys who are here today, so I won't embarrass anyone. But but there's a couple of things that I took away from that experience, being a little different than having spent 12 years at Home Depot, where you sort of begin to learn how everything's done. At that point, I was the one with all the institutional knowledge. So I really relied on and used my outside counsel very differently in that prior role than when I came here. And so a couple of takeaways that I'll share to just maybe start opening the floor a little bit on sort of what did I most value coming in the door. And so the first thing I would share would be the practical solutions. This is not anything new, not rocket science. I'm sure Cameron and Ed would share the same. But sort of the plain English, real world discussions, being able to pick up the phone and have a discussion about something that may not really be the best idea or a great idea or maybe all that smart or stellar, but to be able to have a very candid conversation with your outside attorney before you kind of take that leap or that point of no return. And of that, on that point, I wanted to just spend a minute to focus on the importance of, for me in particular, of having my outside counsel participate in the risk debate or conversation or evaluation with me in particular. And there I would say there's a couple of things that I found to be really helpful from my key counsel. One was what I call sort of the no maybes, right? So nobody needs a maybe answer. We don't have a lot of time, and I was fortunate enough to have lunch with Cameron a few weeks ago, and we were, I was fortunate enough to hear some war stories on his end, and you're constantly in this fire of having to make decisions before you're really prepared to make them, right? So you're making a decision, you don't have perfect information, you may not even have all of the key information in front of you, but you're forced to act nonetheless. And so the ability for our outside professionals with that key expertise in an area that I probably don't have, may never have, is so critical. And the ability to articulate the risks in a manner that's really meaningful for my particular company. And whether that's a small risk, a large risk, is really a key component, I think, of being effective counsel, and from my perspective, of really being able to have a strong working relationship with outside counsel. And the other part of that discussion, I would say, is understanding the risk tolerance for your client. And in my situation, I was still learning the risk tolerance of my company, which is very different than what I was accustomed to at a large retail environment. And so you have to really ask sometimes the probing questions of one another and of the business partners involved too, so that you're able to evaluate, articulate not just the legal risks but also the impacts on the community, reputation risk. I mean, a lot of times we end up making decisions based just as much, if not more so, on those factors than on sort of just the pure law. Here's what the statute says, here's what's required, here's how everybody else has done it previously. So I'll just start with that, and I have a few other things we could share later. But
That's great help.
Okay.
What do you think, Cameron, when you're hiring? I mean, entitlements is some of the most risky stuff you could be involved with. What are you looking for in outside counsel?
I think obviously that the company had well-established relationships with various firms in the state, and I've worked with them going back when Jim Schuler started Schuler Homes. But I think one of the things we've looked for, in at least from the 5 years that I've been working at the company and deciding who we brought on to do various things. I mean, obviously, you want to have somewhat of a connection. I think that, most people are competent. It's funny that Erica brought that up because we're just chatting a little bit about, timing of things in this day and age where everybody wants instant gratification. And I think that in the law field, many of you probably deal with that with clients. And we're talking about emails and how long is an acceptable tolerance for not responding.
Wait, let's pause for a second. Just show of hands. So if you get an email from a client, is it acceptable to respond within 1 hour? No hands?
Is it acceptable, or is it the
Well,
minimum? Is it
they're
the
prof-
expectation? Is it the
Expectation.
expectation?
What do you think? How quickly do you think you have to respond?
I think as soon as you possibly can. If it's clear they're expecting an answer.
What do you think, Greg?
Probably the same. I mean, I don't set that hour as a standard, or I'd never get anything else done. But
What is your expectation?
Greg responds in 30 minutes.
What else, right?
when it's Cameron, I do.
It's not about. I think it's a lot of times it's dealing with generational attorneys, and and when I say generational, I think with some of the attorneys that we've dealt with, and some of them that I've worked for, and then now they're on. It's in kind of a reverse. They grew up in a different generation where the practice of law wasn't so instantaneous in terms of expectations that you couldn't just get a hold of somebody whenever, whether it's via email or text or phone. So there's probably a little bit of a disconnect generationally, but for the most part, I think having wearing the other hat now as a client more than say as an attorney, an hour is acceptable. But
I think it was here in
half a
15
day
minutes
or
when we were talking.
half a day or 1 day. I mean, that's a little bit more annoying. And then you do the email, then you call the office, and then you call a cell phone, and then But anyway, it's part of it.
I mean, I think what I'm trying to develop is some form of mutual credibility with my outside counsel about what the rhythms of our work together are. I mean, if I send an email to my outside counsel and say I have an emergency, I expect an answer, and if they're not available to me on an emergency basis, then I got to solve the problem some other way, and I may not, I may think about that the next time I decide who to use. But I expect of myself to only use that when it's needed. And that way I develop a relationship with outside counsel that I'm not going to get surprised by a non-response, and hopefully they're not going to get surprised by the priority that I place on it. So if it's a kind of a generic inquiry and I don't say that I need it right away, and I lead the outside counsel to think it's not a priority, well, that's my fault, not their fault. But if I say I need it. And if we're in the middle of a complete negotiation that's just a chain reaction negotiation all the way through, where I have to maintain my momentum, I want continual access. So, there's no cookie cutter answer on that. But where it starts with really is a relationship between you and the counsel, and everybody always wants to know, what do you want in your outside counsel? I would say one thing I really want is just a rhythm and a relationship and a mutual understanding of how we work together. That's really, really important.
And this is to all of you, but do you ever feel pressure, from your companies, that you're using too much outside counsel, you're running up bills, and is value seen in the outside counsel work, ultimately as a company?
Totally. I mean, let me answer it. And I think, one of the observations just listening to Erica and Cameron is there's no real cookie cutter outside in-house counsel. It depends a little bit on who you are, what your roles are in the company, and it depends on your company also, and how they use you and how they expect to use you. For example, I listened to Cameron saying that he one of the advantages is that he doesn't have to practice law anymore. I think that's what you were saying, and at least directly. And that's partly because you have such a visible role in the community relations side of it. That's different from me. I practice as much law as I can. And there's two reasons for that. The first is I like practicing law, not that you don't, but I like doing the work, and I can do the work. And also, if I do the work, it's less money to the company. But my particular company gives me a lot of flexibility to make the judgments as to when I need to go outside and spend money outside and when I can do it in-house. And so, and observing it from a distance, I think it is different based on which company you're in, how much pressure you're under. I don't feel a lot of pressure to defend myself inside of Outrigger. Maybe other people do. But the bottom line is, the pressure that I'm under at Outrigger is that I am expected to deliver the end result, legal judgment, and also the related business judgment that comes from that legal judgment to my executive committee, to my fellow executives, to everybody in the company, to my board of directors. And so the pressure I'm under is to give them the right advice. And if I don't get the right advice from my outside counsel, then I'm not, it's going to be more difficult to translate. And by advice, I agree with Erica there that I do want the legal advice from my outside counsel. In fact, that's one of the main reasons I use outside counsel, is to get the legal advice that I may not know, especially in areas of specialization where I'm just not keeping up on the law all the time. Or maybe I just want a gut check on what I learned in law school. Does that still apply in Hawaii? Before I give some advice along those ways. But I appreciate outside counsel that helped me to make the business decision as well. So I don't mind the if this, then this, if this, then this. But I expect it to be attached to, in my view, this from a decision perspective. Now, it's up to me to make that call with my client about whether we're going to do it, but I appreciate the input.
What kind of pressure do you face from, Howard Hughes is based out of, where's that?
Dallas.
Out of Dallas. And, it's a massive company. What kind of pressures do you feel you face here in Hawaii?
There's quite a bit of pressure, I would say, on both the legal side and the business side. So, because we're developing projects, there's a very close accounting of those projects on an ongoing basis. Maybe a little bit less pressure on some of those items that are a little bit better absorbed into sort of our business operation, just because it's part of some other bigger number and no one's really paying attention other than me. So of course I'm looking. But one thing that's interesting that I think is a tough juggle, depending upon what company you're with and depending upon the role that in-house counsel chooses to take. Well, maybe I should rephrase that, because what I really have seen is that the company often dictates whether or not they want all legal issues to go directly through their in-house legal department. So I'm sure we've all seen experiences where some companies are very, I'll call loose, in that business partners are calling outside attorneys generally, liberally, all the time. That's sort of par for the course. And then of course there might be some other shops that are run a lot more conservatively, and because of the cost-conscious issues often, but sometimes just for other efficiencies, they really want in-house lawyers calling the outside lawyers, so the advice is going through that stream. I've come around to seeing the benefit of both, but one of the things that I think is a challenge on both sides, meaning as an in-house lawyer and also when you are in private practice, is managing all of that, right? So you've got, I have someone who sits next door to me picking up the phone and calling one of my attorneys, and what they're telling her may or may not be accurate in terms of how I view the priority of the work, some of the other cost containment elements of the work, the ultimate work product. So I recognize how challenging that is for outside counsel in many respects. And in my particular experience, because there was no in-house person prior to me joining, the guys just picked up the phone and called the attorneys all the time. Very regular practice. And so one of the things that I tried to commit to when I first joined was to try to work a little bit, as much as I could, and I don't think I've done a very good job of it, I'll be honest, but on what Ed was referring to as kind of this rhythm. So for my particular instance, it's not going to be that we're going to say business people cannot ever phone an attorney. We just don't have the luxury of saying that, maybe in a few more years. But at the same time, the concept of just liberally picking up the telephone really isn't effective. And so one of the things that I try to offer, again, I think I get maybe a D+ in this, but is trying to just manage that emergency phone call all the time from the business person. Oh my God, I need this right now. And then the lawyer rushes, turns around something, and what happens? It sits on the business person's desk, right? Because it's just what happens, and no fault of anyone in-house, and I would say the same thing, to our development folks if they were sitting in the room, but that's really what happens a lot of times. And it's not effective, right? Cost-wise, time-wise, and I don't always have all of the big picture myself, but to the extent that we can help to manage that a little bit, I think that's where the relationship really can be of value, so that you can hopefully taper down on everything feeling like it's an emergency all the time, and maybe add some value to, okay, this is actually our first priority, because the business folks didn't realize we actually are already working on this part of the property transfer or whatever is going on. And so this is really where we need where the effort focused. So not exactly answering your question, but kind of just something I feel like I struggle with a lot, and I see the value when you do it well. I think there's a good value inside and outside.
It almost sounds like you're describing your role as almost a little bit of a gatekeeper, right? And it must be hard coming into a system that was already in place, an extremely dynamic system, where people did get into those habits, and now you want to make sure that you know what's going on instead of a million independent little decisions being made.
That's accurate.
Well, your situation must be so different, Cameron.
I mean, I think it's a little different. I think it is and it isn't. I mean, I think we're a very small operation locally. I mean, we probably have 40 to 50 employees, and that includes construction staff, it includes salespeople. So from an executive perspective, who's in the office, who would need to call, who is in charge of things that deal with the attorneys, it's very few people. And I think being that we're small, we probably rely more on our outside counsel than say maybe others who are bigger or more well-seasoned. But that being said, I think the relationships that we've been able to build with them, or people that we choose to work with, are predicated on the fact that we know that we can work with them and that they are going to be efficient, and that we don't get. I wouldn't say we get so much pressure from our corporate offices or even locally to say don't call lawyers or don't you're calling too much. I've never gotten that in 5 years. A lot of it is a function of the business you're in and the situation that you're dealing with. And like Ed says, if they're buying a hotel somewhere, obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, or you're going through a process, or we're doing an acquisition. There's just the nature of that business is going to be that you're calling more or you're dealing more. And I think being an attorney helps me to realize that and just inherently control those costs. But obviously, at the end of the day, we're having to make decisions and rely on advice of people to make decisions that will cost the company or could cost the company, tens of millions of dollars. So inherently, the system is set up in such a way that we need somebody to blame. No, really. I mean, they can fire me, but I think we need to have a system in place where the information the decisions that need to be made at that point are based on credible information that we get from somebody. And the company's going to make a decision that's could eventually cost them a lot of money. We need to have a good enough relationship, or not be afraid to pick up the phone call and get the answer we need, because it's going to cost us $1,000 or whatever. And that's kind of how we operate.
I want to follow up on that, because something Erica said earlier about you want practical solutions and you don't want the maybes. And by that, I think you're talking about the 25-page memo that goes, well, it could be this, or it could be that, or maybe it's this. And in Ohio, once in 1947, they decided that. So, some of that is a function, of an attorney, I think, in a firm wanting to play a little CYA. And it's not that you're trying to pad the work, but you do want to make sure that you give a client complete knowledge. But what I'm hearing from the three of you is you don't need a million different pieces of information thrown at you. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't feel I have to CYA.
Mm-hmm.
That's the comfort level that I have. Maybe it's different and maybe frankly it's different in public companies, because I'm in a private company, right? I have a very narrow range of reporting. When you think about it, I don't have to tell the SEC what I did or anything like that. So it could be different in a public company where you feel more the need to document every single thing. But I'll tell you one thing for sure, if all I really wanted was a gut check on the law and I get a 25-page memo that costs, $10,000, that's not what I need. I mean, I just need a quick email saying, yeah, this is generally what it is, and hopefully that helps my outside counsel to feel like they've CYA'd enough just to, protect themselves against my successor. Or any mistake or whatever it might be, or for me for that matter. But I mean, that's just not the way that I work back on the relationship side of things. And when necessary, I don't mind the 25-page memo if that's what's called for under the circumstances, including paying for it. So it's just it's advice and billing appropriate to the need of the client. And that's the rhythm and the relationship that needs to be developed, so that I'm not surprised and by more than I need and more expense than I have to defend, and the outside counsel's not surprised by me being upset, about a bill or about a piece of advice. So, yeah, I mean, well, I think that's kind of the way I look at it.
So with that, and maybe that's the answer to the question, but what would be the one thing that you find the most frustrating in dealing with outside counsel? And I don't mean any particular firm you may be working with now, but just in general. I'm going to ask each of you that.
Well, we've touched on all of it. First of all, unresponsiveness when I need some response is frustrating. An unexpected bill for unexpected work is frustrating. Wishy-washy advice is frustrating. I don't mind the maybes of a situation, because so many of the situations in law, generally, including, the kind of law I practice and oversee, are, shades of gray. You don't always have the. If you had the answer, you probably wouldn't have asked outside counsel to start with. So I don't mind outside counsel telling me, hey, I can't figure it in so many words. There's no real predictability to the answer, and so there's maybe this and maybe this. But I want the development of the law and the issues to be concise, together with some business-oriented thoughts that help me to make the decisions I have to make for the company and for my client. I go back to that all the time, because think about it as I'm the representative of your client, but I have a client, the internal, and there are a lot of clients, and some of them are better than others, right? So I have to navigate that, and I think we all feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what Ed said is the same issues, whether it's responsiveness or whether it's, having been an associate or having worked in law firms and been on that side of it, having kind of moved to the other side now, where you kind of just want, I kind of just want to get to the point, a lot of times, and, understanding that background, and I can read that for myself. I'm not super smart, but I'm smart enough to read something and kind of gather from that, where you're paying somebody because they have an expertise in some particular area, and then, really just being more, I don't know if that's a function of being impatient on my part or growing more impatient, but I kind of just want to deal with the issue and understand the issue, and then, like Ed, I mean, I don't think anybody minds getting a document that at the end of the day is going to help us make a better business decision, whether it's 1 page or 20 pages. I just think, and I will say this for the attorneys that we do work with and I do work with regularly, I don't get, I think they all have a good sense of what is needed at that point and what everybody's tolerance level is in our company for things. And but I just think for me, it's just being more impatient and direct, and expecting that in return a little bit. Yeah.
I'm not sure I have anything great to add, but I do agree with the comments from Ed and Cameron. The one thing that I think is tough and can be frustrating, and I thankfully haven't had this happen very often, but the timing on when to bubble up an issue is a tricky one. But if you get it, you wait a little while, okay, that's understood because you are trying to work it out, or trying to look at alternatives, or trying to bring the right advice to whoever your client is. But the waiting too long can really be a problem. And I think we would all share, and many other people in this room, is there's the real problem, which is sort of the legal problem, but we could probably all fix that. There's smart enough people in the room, smart enough people on the panel. We could probably fix the legal issue. Really what becomes the problem is the sort of embarrassing side of it, right? So one of the executives grabs you in the hallway and says, hey, what's going on with this thing? I just heard, we didn't get approval for blank, and you know nothing of it. And so it's, unfortunately, that can be the bigger driver. But it's just an example of where the communication line, I think, is so critical. And again, I really try not to sort of compare. I know that there are certain attorneys that I work with that I really go to for very specific things. Maybe there's one person who's sort of I just got to bounce this off of someone. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm not going to get a big crazy bill. I'm not going to be asked, do you want a memo? I mean, no, it's maybe a 30-minute conversation. Sometimes it's 5. And so each person has sort of this redeeming quality. All attorneys are not the same. And as you learn people and improve the relationships, the more you learn that. But part of that relationship is it a two-way communication? Mm-hmm. So if there is an issue that you don't have visibility to, or you're just not sure if you've been paying enough attention to, is sometimes also the case. To be able to have someone raise that to you in a candid way, if possible, to make sure that you're in the loop, preferably at the right time, I think is really, really valuable.
So what you're saying is, if, let's say, you had outside counsel who's watching legislation or watching cases or keeping their eye on, changes that are happening at the Capitol, stuff that maybe isn't right in your radar, you want that person to pick up the phone and say to you, hey, Erica, check this out?
Yes, I think the answer to that is yes. Mm-hmm. My example was actually more so, you have an attorney that attended a hearing for you, and they gave the answer to someone else. So someone else in my company knows the answer, but I don't know it. Okay. And again, they may have even sent me a beautiful email saying everything went great, everything went haywire, close it down. I don't know. Right? It could have been good, bad, otherwise. But just making sure that there's a trustworthy line of communication, I would say.
Uh-huh.
You want to put a question?
Yeah. David.
I understand one of the few states in the union that require inside counsel to be members of the bar. Any comments on that? Does it keep people from say the company for one reason or another got out a really good senior tax counsel from Boston, and the guy says, I know why I'm going to go study and sit for the bar again. Is that a good idea that you have to be a member of the Hawaii State Bar Association, or a bad idea, and why? Or do you care? Would you, I know that you're all members, but I'll defer.
Well, I'm practicing law, so I should be licensed. I mean, that's kind of a very simplistic answer to you. I wouldn't, I don't think, if I was the hirer of the in-house counsel, I don't think I would hire an unlicensed attorney. I mean, that would be like, well, why are you going to do that?
What if you're licensed in New York or Boston? I mean, it's not
same
the
basic,
licensing.
I mean, okay, fine. It depends on what the jurisdictional responsibilities are. But if it's a Hawaii company, yeah, I'd like them to know a little bit about Hawaii law. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason to change it.
I don't I kept my license active. I mean, I don't practice day to day. I do like I said, we multitask a lot. So like things that I don't need to send out, like write-up entries or things like that we deal with, I'll handle. So I mean, I think I do think that there's some benefit to having some working knowledge of the various jurisdictional issues that come up. I mean, I don't know, but at the end of the day,
So
Erica just
I
suffered.
did. So this is
She says
personal.
lies.
No, you know.
Boy, bar.
So I just went through this, and when I moved here, I was my attitude was very much of it's a privilege to practice law, and you should do what's customary, and it's not unreasonable to sit for the bar of the state you're going to sit in. Now, having said that, do I think that makes me an expert on the changes, to Hawaii law that really come across my desk every day? No. I mean, nothing I studied actually helped me with a matter that came across my desk. I mean, we all know that. However, I believe in the standard of our profession. And I do think that there is a value to being able to go somewhere else and continue that profession with some sort of process involved. So, so a few months ago, I was probably like, tears and and hating it and all that, but
You passed it.
I did.
Now
So
I-
now I think everybody should take it.
I'm really happy, given my own answer, that you passed.
Yeah, I'm glad you came around on that. Aaron. So I'm okay by you. Okay. All right.
Mark?
Yeah, do you treat outside counsel who are transactional versus litigation, do you deal with them?
Well, I guess the answer to that question is, you do need outside counsel more from litigation, because it's just very, very difficult to do litigation in-house. So the practical reality is that if I have any kind of thing that's in litigation, that goes out pretty fast. The development of how to handle a potential litigation matter, I might keep it in-house or consult with outside counsel on it, just depending. Transactional is more easily done in-house, so that's a very simple answer to it.
I was just wondering whether in your interactions with them, because obviously you would need an outside counsel for litigation. Is it a different rhythm? Maybe that's the
Nothing that I said is materially different. You in your in-house counsel practice, including your consultations with your outside counsel, your goal is to avoid that situation altogether. You never want to retain outside litigation counsel.
Right.
It's defensive it's defensive practicing the whole way through. So if you got to that point, something unusual happened, or you didn't quite handle it correctly. But sorry, I don't know if anybody else has it.
I would just say a little bit, just really touching on it, that I think I do, just because of the nature of the situations are different, right? I mean, when we're doing a transaction requiring property, it's a much more regulated and regimented process that I can understand. Even though I did work at the prosecutors, I don't really understand this whole litigation thing. I mean, it's just a different process, so you're necessarily the level of comfort and you can control a transaction, can't control, as we may find out what the Hawaii Supreme Court is going to do or whatever. It's very different. So I think inherently you deal with the lawyers differently.
I've got two questions. One for Ed. Is it more fun making the laws or complying with them?
More fun making laws or complying with them. It's far more fun making laws.
The second one is picking up at Dave's. Multidisciplinary jurisdictional practice is an issue that comes up here every couple of years. And what it may or may not do to our bar is a lot of political reasons and other things. But from the House Counsel standpoint, do you, I assume you hire counsel from outside the jurisdiction for advice in certain situations, and I'm wondering at what point you have a sense that the bar here in town is not sufficient to cover those areas and the like. When do you go outside the state and when don't you?
Do you guys want to take that? I got some stuff.
No, I mean, I think for us, we don't do that necessarily at the local level here, just because Horton is a publicly traded national company, so we have issues that come up. When I was at Campbell, we did, for a litigation issue, we did hire the mainland counsel to handle the issue, just because I think of the degree of the issue, and I don't know if it was because of the nature of it or why the decision was made, but I think, by and large, I think there's sufficient attorneys in Hawaii to handle any issue. And it just becomes, for us, if it's a issue that deals with the publicly traded nature of the company, then it probably goes outside, but everything else is for us to handle locally.
We do go out, we do go outside of Hawaii. So, I mean, recognizing that for Outrigger, we have 15-plus properties that are not in Hawaii, and a lot of development work going outside of Hawaii. And that stuff we don't do in Hawaii. We do it pretty much out of our Thailand office, where I have an attorney that is a very, very good attorney and supervises that Kuliana over there. But for kind of outrigger-wide issues, and even for some of the issues that I deal with just kind of on a day-to-day basis, we do use non-Hawaii attorneys. Part of that is historical, and part of that is there is, in some very specialized areas, a far greater sophistication outside of Hawaii than in. It's hard to find the attorney that has the level of sophistication and experience to truly answer the question that you have. And then actually, interestingly, and I don't know if it's true of you all, there's an interesting ingredient here, which is that Hawaii is such a small town. And sometimes we get so worried about confidentiality, including the extremely confidential stuff, that's just the crown jewels. And on occasion, I just haven't taken that risk, even under attorney-client privilege, just because I have an option. But that's a pretty narrow band of stuff. But in all candor, that's why I sometimes go out of Hawaii.
Any other questions?
I don't know if I'll formulate it right. I wanted to follow up a little bit on what Erica was saying. One of the things I wrestle with sometimes, and I would imagine other people do too, is that question of when to bubble up. When a lot of times you're involved in something, and then it goes back in-house and it's percolating along, and maybe you're still popping up emails and stuff. You don't want to seem like you're trying to generate feelings by popping up and saying, well, here's my opinion. But on the other hand, you don't want it to seem like, well, why did you just recede into the background and stop participating? Are you disinterested now? Do you have any guidance to offer as to how to manage that balance?
Probably not anything amazing, because it's so case by case. One of the things that I think is helpful is, I think every company or project, however you look at it, we're kind of all project sort of people, but has its particular little prickly points. And so there are particular sensitivities that go with that project or that company. And so to the extent that it's one of those issues, I just always feel like it's so much easier to just raise it. And if you're worried about it appearing a particular way, you pick up the phone. I'm a big fan, by the way, just of the phone, which I never can answer my phone, but it's actually the better way, right? Because I really don't want an email from you telling me that something that you think I might do is wrong. I mean, right? I don't want that email, so don't send me that email most of the time. But sometimes I need that email from you, right? So I understand, but the phone call is a little easier, and that way it's a more developed and robust conversation as well, right? Because if you really are a little bit in the background, it might be that you don't have all the information. It might be that the issue is moving so quickly that we've dropped it all together. That has happened, 100 times. And so it is difficult in that circumstance. But for certain, I don't think there's anything ever wrong with just mentioning, hey, there was just an article last week about, this issue really being scrutinized right now. And if you're thinking of not mentioning this in your whatever, I would have to advise against that. There's nothing at all wrong with that. I would invite that phone call or email, for that matter.
How do you like being inside versus outside in general? All of you were in private practice before. Anything you miss about it? Do you like working with
Miss about private practice? I don't miss billings.
Yeah.
I don't miss writing my hours down. I don't miss that at all. It's kind of interesting, you know, that's a pretty common question, and, you know, what's different about being in-house, especially at Outrigger versus outhouse, I did that again. Don't worry,
It's
that's
true.
not the way. So for about the first 1 year, the answer was, the weirdest thing was working in Waikiki. Because, you know, downtown, 29 years downtown plus, and, you know, we got our own little community downtown, and, you know, everybody pretty much has the same background. I mean, you know, dresses the same, and et cetera, and then I'm down in my office in Waikiki, and I walk outside at lunch hour, and it's like surfboards and bikinis, and nobody knows who I am, which is completely refreshing. But no, I think I did like the private practice of law, and I could see going back to it if I didn't have to bill my time anymore. But I think the biggest difference, there's a couple of differences. First of all, the biggest difference, and most in-house counsel will tell you this, and it's true of all of us here from what I can hear, is that your responsibilities are not just the lawyer. You are the client in a way. And so, you know, my responsibilities Outrigger are kind of in four stovepipes. One, and they're not stovepipes, they all intermingle, but CLO is one of them, to do the legal stuff. I'm the secretary of the corporation, so I got to deal with all of that, which is part legal, mostly legal. I got to oversee government affairs. And then the last one is senior vice president, which is one of 10 members of the executive committee. And, you know, when I go there, I am the lawyer, but I'm also an executive. And so, you know, you are your client. So sometimes, you know, after 29 years of practicing law, where I got to call up a client and say, here are the options, and maybe give some business advice, and ultimately it's, you know, it's your decision. All of a sudden, I wake up one day and give legal advice. I'm looking in the mirror, and I got to make the call. I mean, which is, most in-house counsel will tell you that that's a very, very rewarding part of the job. The ability to actually influence the outcome of the enterprise from an executive perspective as opposed to a legal perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I get to wear a lot of hats. Obviously, some hats are like more than others. I mean, that TV thing wasn't so much, but you know, I think the being able to influence business decisions, being able to, you know, to the extent you want to be involved in legal issues, being able to do that, and I think that's been, you know, the most rewarding thing. You know, the billing thing aside, I mean, that controls your life a little bit, but I did enjoy being able to work with a lot of different clients and being able to help in that respect. And now you kind of have, you are a little bit of the business guy and the client now, and you got to kind of manage yourself a little bit better. So it's a little different, but I will say I enjoy being on the business side more than I enjoyed being on the legal side. But you know, there's a lot of rewarding things about both.
I echo Cameron's comments. I definitely enjoy the business side, and not just having that little piece of the pie, you know, draft this particular item as a transactional lawyer, but really being able to see the whole big picture. Of course, it's, in my opinion, much more stressful because you wake up at 2 in the morning because you're thinking about the big picture, but it's definitely much more interesting. What is challenging to try to reproduce, though, is the ability to walk down the hall and get and bounce something off of someone who has a slightly different expertise. So, you know, I'm not a tax lawyer, but it would be nice to just walk down the hall and bounce something off of someone. So now I have to pick up the phone, which is okay, but not as easy as, you know, going to grab a cup of coffee and grabbing Bob or whoever.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. I echo that. It's a lot easier to do basic issue spotting when you have so many professionals around you that have the ability to help you out with a fact situation. So in some ways, the importance of your independent issue spotting capabilities is heightened. And I think that does get back to using outside counsel as a partner and having a level of trust that they kind of have your back also. You know, they're out there in the community, and they've got their eyes on things, and if they see something that they think, they know enough about you and your business to know what's important, they can issue spot. And it ain't no big thing to shoot me an email saying, hey, did you consider this? I mean, I don't even mind if you bill me for it. I mean, it's just, you know, but I trust that they're not gonna overuse or underuse that expectation.
I sleep way less now than I used to. I don't know. And I think it's a function of just being in one situation, right, versus being able to kind of go between clients or go between issues. I really sleep a lot less than I used to. We have twin daughters too now, so but I still, you know, I think it weighs on you more when you're dealing with it day to day than saying, you know, you're working on a different matter like every 3 or 4 hours, or you work on a transaction for 2 months and then it's done. You can put it behind you and say, okay, now I'll move on to the next thing. When you're dealing with and you're working at a company that deals with issues, it's very hard to do that and to walk away and say, okay, now let's move to the next thing, and without, you know, internalizing a lot of what goes on, irrespective of whether it's hotels or development or whatever. You kind of you take it on. You take on a life of the company much more than you would as an attorney. And I think that's one of the downsides of being in-house a little bit.
Okay, so it's just about 1 o'clock. Does anybody on the phone have a question for any one of the panelists? Okay, I don't want to keep these people, so is there any one last question? Will we let them go, get back to their busy days? I got one quick question for each one of you, and I know you have children at different stages of life, all right? Yours are young adults, your real little ones, and you got kids. Are any of them lawyers?
Not yet.
Would they want to, would you encourage them to be lawyers?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a great profession. I mean, I've enjoyed it immensely. I did with them what my father did with me, which was to talk about it so that you develop the appreciation. But either they didn't believe me or they don't trust me. I have hopes for one of them, but yeah, sure.
What about you, Cameron?
I don't know. I just want to get through the day, or get through preschool and morning. You know, it's interesting with kids now. It's just different. You know, and you want them just to be happy. And I think, you know, I don't have any lawyers in my family, so you kind of picked it up. But you know, I don't see any. I wouldn't have any problem with that at all.
How about for your boys?
I try to talk about what I do a lot to just expose my 2 boys who are elementary school age. You know, I probably am a little bit more in the camp. I wouldn't necessarily push them to law school. If there was an interest, certainly. But I feel like, unfortunately, when I talk to so many of my peers, they're just not excited about their work. And that's probably a bad tone to end this panel on. But here's the silver lining. The silver lining was that both of my colleagues here both shared really inspiring stories, especially Ed, if I could share. I mean, your enthusiasm, I mean, including for practice of law, still is inspiring, I think, and maybe you know, the exposure for the young lawyers to hear. Yes, it's tough at the law firm right now, but there's a lot of really great work to be done out there. Don't just get stuck in the silo. So, if I can turn my lemons into lemonade, maybe that's what it says.
Great note, and thank you all so much.